My friends and I thought camping near the cornfields would be a fun way to celebrate the last few weeks of summer. We drove out to the rural outskirts of our town, where vast fields stretched endlessly beneath the starry sky. As dusk fell, the air grew thick with tension, and a low hum of cicadas filled the silence. We set up our tents and gathered around the fire, sharing ghost stories that made us laugh nervously. But as the night deepened, an uneasy feeling settled over me. It started with the rustling in the corn. At first, I brushed it off as animals moving through the stalks, but then I heard it. A low whisper, soft yet unmistakable. My heart raced, and I could feel the blood drain from my face. I turned to my friends, but they were too wrapped up in their stories to notice my discomfort. In a moment of foolishness, I suggested a game of hide and seek, hoping to shake off the eerie feeling. I was the seeker, and my friend Jake quickly ducked into the corn, laughing as he disappeared between the tall stalks. I began counting, trying to distract myself from the nagging whispers that seemed to echo through the field. When I reached 10, I opened my eyes and called out for Jake, but my voice was swallowed by the night. The whispering grew louder, an eerie cacophony that seemed to beckon me deeper into the field. "Jake?" I called, my voice trembling. "Where are you?" But only silence answered, thick and suffocating. After what felt like hours of searching, I stumbled into a clearing, breathless and panicked. There stood Jake, his eyes wide and unseeing, like he was staring at something far beyond me. I felt a chill run down my spine. "Run," he yelled suddenly, his voice breaking through the fog of confusion. Confused, I turned to look back at the corn. The whispers intensified, now sounding like distant laughter mixed with something darker, more sinister. My instincts kicked in and I grabbed Jake's arm. We ran together, the corn towering around us, twisting and turning as we navigated the maze. Every step felt like a battle against an unseen force, something lurking just out of sight, hidden among the stalks. The whispers morphed into a mocking tone, echoing our fear. We sprinted, adrenaline coursing through our veins, but the feeling of being hunted clung to us like a shadow. Finally, we broke free from the field, stumbling back into the light of our campfire. Gasping for breath, we turned to look back at the cornfield, which loomed ominously in the darkness. The whispers faded into the night, but the feeling of dread lingered, thick and unshakable. "What was that?" I managed to ask, still trembling. Jake shook his head, his face pale. "I don't know," he whispered, glancing back at the field. "But it felt like something was watching us, like we weren't alone in there." Our friends gathered closer, looking just as unsettled. Sarah spoke up, her voice low. "We thought it was just the stories getting to us, but we felt it too. This feeling of something watching us from the corn." She hesitated, glancing at the others who nodded nervously. And then we saw something else. "What?" I asked, a chill running down my spine. "Bones," Mark said grimly, pointing toward the cornfield. Animal bones, just scattered there in the dirt. It wasn't just one or two either. There were dozens, all twisted and broken. A wave of fear swept over us, and we exchanged a look that needed no explanation. Without another word, we scrambled to pack up our gear, our hearts pounding as we hurried to leave the place behind. The fun of our summer camping trip was overshadowed by the terror of what we had encountered in the corn. To this day, I still wonder what lurked there in the shadows and what it wanted from us. The memory sends chills down my spine, a haunting reminder of the darkness waiting just beyond the light. Every autumn, our small town held a harvest festival complete with a sprawling corn maze. It was a tradition for my friends and me to visit each year, laughing and competing to see who could find the exit first. This time, however, would be different. The evening air was crisp as we arrived at the maze, the sun dipping below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. The atmosphere buzzed with excitement as families wandered through the entrance, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The owner, an older man with a grizzled beard, stood at the entrance, his eyes scanning the crowd with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. "Just stick together and you'll be fine," he called out as we entered, his voice gravelly and ominous. We nodded and headed in, the tall stalks towering above us, swallowing us in their rustling embrace. At first, we laughed and joked, navigating through the twists and turns of the maze. We lost track of time, the fading light casting eerie shadows among the rows. But as the evening wore on, we began to realize we had wandered too far from the entrance. I checked my phone, but there was no signal. "We should head back," I suggested, but my friends were too engrossed in the challenge. Against my better judgment, I agreed to continue exploring. We split up, thinking it would be easier to find the way out that way. I paired with my friend Rhea, while the others went off in different directions. As we made our way deeper into the maze, the laughter faded, replaced by an unsettling quiet. I felt a chill run down my spine, but I brushed it off. Just as we turned a corner, we heard a blood-curdling scream. It echoed through the maze, bouncing off the walls of corn, and my heart stopped. "Did you hear that?" Rhea whispered, her face pale. I nodded, frozen in place. "We need to find the others." We retraced our steps, but the maze felt different now, more like a labyrinth than a fun attraction. We called out for our friends, but the only answer was silence. As we rounded a corner, we spotted one of our friends, Paul, standing alone. He looked dazed, his eyes wide and unblinking. "Where's everyone else?" I asked, panic creeping into my voice. "I don't know," he replied, his voice shaking. They just disappeared." The gravity of his words hit me like a punch to the gut. My stomach twisted with dread. "What do you mean? How could they just disappear?" "I was right behind them, and then they were gone," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. We decided to stick together, our hearts pounding in unison as we continued through the maze, calling out for our friends. Each time we called their names, I felt a growing sense of despair. The air grew heavy, the whispers of the corn now a menacing rustle. As we turned another corner, I thought I saw movement in the shadows. A fleeting glimpse of something that sent a jolt of fear through me. "Did you see that?" I asked, my voice trembling. But Paul and Rhea were looking straight ahead, their expressions turning to horror as they saw something in the distance. "We have to get out of here," Paul said, his voice urgent. We sprinted toward the exit, the maze twisting and turning like a living thing. Just when I thought we were close, I heard that blood-curdling scream again. This time closer, echoing off the walls of corn. Panic surged through me, and I felt a primal urge to flee. Finally, we burst through the exit, gasping for fresh air, but the joy of freedom was short-lived. The festival was still bustling, but our friends were nowhere to be seen. We ran to the entrance breathless and told the owner what had happened. He frowned, a strange glint in his eye. "You're not the first to lose someone in there," he said. "Sometimes they don't come back the same." A chill ran down my spine. We called for hours, searching desperately, but as the night wore on, hope started slipping away. Finally, just as dawn was breaking, we heard quiet footsteps approaching from the shadows of the corn. Amelia and Liam emerged, but something was deeply wrong. Their faces were pale, their eyes wide and unfocused. They barely reacted to our shouts of relief, simply standing there, shivering and silent. We tried to ask what had happened, but they didn't answer, only stared blankly past us. When the police arrived, they pulled Amelia aside, hoping to get some answers. After a long silence, she finally whispered, "I saw it." Her voice trembled, her eyes darting nervously. There was a scarecrow. It jumped at me. At that moment, it clicked in my mind. The blood-curdling scream I had heard earlier, it was Amelia's. The dark shadow I thought I'd seen darting past me in the maze, it had to be the scarecrow. My stomach twisted as I pieced it all together. The police left that day with more questions than answers. None of us ever returned to the Harvest Festival, and the maze was shut down by morning, with no trace of the owner. But sometimes when I pass a cornfield and hear the rustle of stalks, I remember Amelia's words and wonder what terrible things might lurk just beyond the rows, waiting to be seen. In my small town, rumors swirled about an old farmhouse at the edge of a cornfield. It had been abandoned for decades, and stories of strange occurrences and ghostly figures were common among the locals. As teenagers, my friends and I often dared each other to explore it, but we never found the courage until one summer night when we decided to make an adventure out of it. It was a warm evening, and the moon hung high, illuminating the dark fields. We drove to the farmhouse, excitement bubbling as we approached the crumbling structure. The paint was peeling, and the windows were shattered, giving the house a haunted appearance. As we stepped onto the creaking porch, a chill ran down my spine. I brushed it off, telling myself it was just a draft. We pushed open the heavy door, which groaned in protest. Inside, the air was stale, thick with dust and memories of a time long past. We split into pairs, wandering through the dimly lit rooms. The floorboards creaked under our weight, and the faint smell of mold hung in the air. I wandered into the living room, where old furniture lay covered in sheets, and the wallpaper peeled away like old skin. As I explored, I came across strange carvings on the walls, images of people trapped, their faces twisted in fear. I felt a sense of unease wash over me, but I couldn't shake my curiosity. I called out to my friends, but there was no response. It was as if the house swallowed their voices. I turned to leave the room, but that's when I heard it, a low, guttural sound coming from the attic. My heart raced. I hesitated, but my curiosity got the better of me. I climbed the narrow staircase, the air growing colder with each step. As I reached the top, I felt a strange energy envelop me, a feeling of being watched. I opened the attic door slowly, and the darkness swallowed me whole. My flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. I noticed old family photos scattered across the floor, the faces staring back at me with hollow eyes. And then I heard a loud bang like a gunshot. It seemed like it came from somewhere inside. I spun around, but the attic was empty. Panic surged through me and I rushed back down the stairs. When I reached the living room, I found my friends huddled together, their faces pale. "Did you hear that?" one of them asked, eyes wide with fear. Before I could respond, the front door slammed shut with a deafening bang. We all jumped, hearts racing. I felt a wave of dread wash over me. In a state of panic, we bolted for the door, but it wouldn't budge. I pushed against the door with all my strength, and finally, it swung open. We stumbled outside, gasping for air, the cool night wrapping around us like a comforting blanket. We ran back to the car, glancing over our shoulders, half expecting to see something following us. As we drove away, the farmhouse loomed behind us, its windows dark and empty, but somehow full of secrets. Months later, I learned that the house had once belonged to a family who had mysteriously vanished, leaving behind their belongings and unanswered questions. The stories about the farmhouse haunted me, a chilling reminder of the darkness that could hide behind closed doors. I vowed never to return. The memory of that night etched in my mind forever, a testament to the terrifying unknown that lurks in places abandoned by time